Have you ever had one of those moments where a phrase you've heard 1,000 times, maybe on a coffee mug or a greeting card, suddenly hits you differently?
Oh, absolutely.
You look a little closer, and it's like layers of unexpected meaning just peel back, revealing something you never fully grasped.
It happens all the time, doesn't it? These little snippets become almost cultural shorthand, and their original context or even their real depth can kind of get lost.
Exactly. And today we're taking a deep dive into some truly profound concepts that often get simplified. Divine plans, individual purpose, and that age-old, sometimes bewildering question of free will versus predestination.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We're going to really unpack the popular understandings and then explore much deeper contextual interpretations from a fascinating range of sources you shared with us.
Right. Our mission really is to go beyond those surface-level assumptions and sort of reveal the richer tapestry underneath. We'll look at specific biblical passages often used for inspiration, then dive into a surprisingly lively online debate about free will.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it gets heated. And finally, we'll delve into some really practical approaches to finding your purpose. You should discover some genuinely surprising nuggets of knowledge along the way.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a verse many of you have probably seen everywhere. Jeremiah 29.1, it's on. Like Christian trinkets, bookmarks, plaques, you name it.
It's ubiquitous.
It really is. And the common feeling is that it's this universal promise that, we shouldn't worry because God has a plan for our day and our future is bright, especially when life feels chaotic or unpredictable. It feels like this personal, feel-good promise. But what was the actual message for the people who first heard it?
Well, that's where the historical context becomes not just interesting, but absolutely critical. This passage wasn't written to someone, casually looking for reassurance on a good day.
Right.
It was written around 597 BC to about 10,000 citizens of Judah. And these people had been forcibly taken captive into Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, so captives.
Captives. Imagine their situation. Their homes were gone, the temple, the absolute center of their spiritual and national identity was in ruins, Jerusalem captured, their king blinded and chained. They had truly lost everything, all hope.
Wow. So this wasn't some, generic fortune cookie message for easy times. This was for a nation that was utterly devastated, right in the middle of a profound crisis. How did God even begin to address that kind of desperation?
Precisely. And despite that crushing reality, God spoke through Jeremiah, giving them what, well, at first glance might have seemed like really counterintuitive instructions. Basically, get on with your lives in Babylon.
In exile.
In exile. He told them to build houses, plant gardens, marry, have families, multiply. And incredibly, they were also told to seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For its welfare, you will have welfare.
Pray for Babylon, their captor's city.
Exactly. And he also warned them very strongly against false prophets who were deceiving them with empty promises and false dreams.
Okay. And the future and hope mentioned in verse 11, that's the part that really resonates. But you're saying its original meaning was different.
It was. Very different. That promise was incredibly specific, and it was tied to a timeline. God explicitly said, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you to bring you back to this place.
70 years.
70 years. This wasn't a vague, things will get better soon kind of message. It was a promise tied to a concrete, long-term national restoration.
And why 70 years specifically? Was there, a reason for that number?
There was, actually. Our sources reveal that this 70-year exile was, in essence, a divine judgment. It was for Israel's failure to observe God's law of Sabbath rest for the land.
Oh, right, letting the land lie fallow.
Exactly. Leviticus lays it out. The land was supposed to lie fallow every seventh year, but their disobedience had basically accumulated over centuries, amounting to 70 missed Sabbath rests. So this exile was, in a sense, the land finally getting its overdue rest.
So the plans for welfare and not for calamity to give you a future and a hope in Jeremiah 29.11 refers to the national, physical, and spiritual salvation and restoration of Israel from exile. Not necessarily individual material blessings for every single person listening right then. That's a huge shift.
It's a critical distinction.
Yeah.
It was a collective national promise. And think about it, it's highly probable that many individuals who initially heard that promise did not live to see its 70-year fulfillment.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's important because if you claim verse 11 as just a personal, individual promise today, it often means ignoring the full context, including God's further judgments described later in Jeremiah 29, which really clarify the bigger picture of his actions, both judgment and restoration.
So what does this deep dive into Jeremiah 29.11 mean for us today then, beyond just correcting a common misunderstanding?
Well, the profound takeaway, I think, is that God does not abandon his people. Just as he was faithful to his covenants with Israel, despite their sin and exile, his promises to New Testament believers about future glory are irrevocable. Even when our current circumstances feel far from ideal, we can find real, soul-satisfying comfort knowing he's secured every spiritual blessing for us through Christ, and perfect well-being awaits us in the future. He remains utterly trustworthy, even when the plan unfolds over generations.
That recontextualization of Jeremiah 29.11 really does challenge assumptions. It makes you wonder what other familiar phrases might hold similar hidden depths. And that brings us perfectly to our next dive. The powerful, often quoted phrase from Matthew 25, the least of these. Now, I've heard this passage used very broadly, especially, among progressive and younger evangelicals, and it's very popular in mainstream media too.
Yes, the social gospel interpretation.
Right. It often suggests that the least of these refers to society's general poor and downtrodden, and that good works like feeding the hungry or caring for the oppressed are central to salvation, kind of summarized by that mantra. Preach the gospel, if necessary, use words.
That phrase, the least of these, has indeed gained significant traction. You see whole movements focused on caring for them. And let's be clear, caring for the poor and oppressed is absolutely a good and biblical thing to do. James even identifies acts like that as essential to true religion.
Okay, so it's not wrong to care for the poor, generally.
Not at all. But the critical interpretive question in this specific passage, Matthew 25, is who exactly are the least of these that Jesus is talking about right here?
And that's where the nuance comes in, right? It's not just a blanket statement for all suffering humanity. I mean, I've often thought of the least of these in that much broader sense.
And that's a common reading, but the context here is really crucial. In Matthew 25, verse 40, Jesus uses the phrase, one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them. Now, the term brother in the New Testament consistently refers either to a physical family member or, much more commonly, to the spiritual family of God, meaning other Christians. It doesn't typically refer to all of suffering humanity in general. So, the least of these in this passage refers specifically to other Christians in need. Particularly, the context suggests those itinerant Christian teachers who, because of their ministry, were completely dependent on the hospitality and support of fellow believers. That made them uniquely vulnerable.
So it's about supporting Jesus's spiritual family, equating service to them with serving Jesus himself, because the body of Christ represents Christ on earth. That certainly narrows the scope significantly compared to the broader interpretation.
It does narrow it for this specific passage, yes. The direct beneficiaries Jesus is highlighting here are not the disenfranchised people of the world generally, but his own followers in need. Furthermore, this passage doesn't suggest that these good works are the root of salvation.
Right, that's another key point.
Scripture is really consistent on this. Good works are the fruit of salvation, not its origin. Salvation, as passages like Romans 3.28 and Ephesians 2.8-9 make clear, is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. The good deeds described in Matthew 25 are presented as evidence of an existing salvation, not the basis for getting into the kingdom in the first place.
And what about that popular mantra, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words, the one emphasizing action over actually speaking the message?
Yeah, that phrase, while often well-intentioned, can be quite misleading if taken too far. It's vital to reinforce that words are essential to properly communicate the gospel, as Paul argues forcefully in Romans 10. How can they believe if they haven't heard?
Good point.
A clear verbal presentation of the gospel message has to precede true saving faith. Our actions are good deeds. They authenticate the gospel we preach. They show its power. They don't replace preaching it with words. And in this passage, those authenticating actions are specifically directed toward fellow believers who are suffering.
Okay, so far, we've explored how digging into the context can really transform how we understand familiar verses. But what happens when context, or maybe even core beliefs, seem to clash in a way that creates deep paradox?
Yeah, the big questions.
Exactly. That brings us to one of the most enduring and lively discussions in our sources. The seemingly impossible tension between God's overarching plan and our individual free will. We found this online debate that really zeroes in on this core tension. Are God's plan and free will mutually exclusive?
A classic dilemma.
If God's will always plays out no matter what we do we truly have free will? And this was a really challenging question that came up. Does God know someone will die as an unbeliever and create them anyway, knowing they will end up in hell?
Yeah, that is one of the toughest theological and philosophical knots to untangle, and it creates profound tension. Some contributors to that discussion argued, pretty logically, that if something is predestined, by definition, it cannot change.
Makes sense.
But then others countered that predestination can change through our own choice, which they claimed is the very essence of free will. You can immediately see the sort of logical collision there.
You know, hearing these arguments like out, it's easy to feel like you're caught in a kind of logical trap. On one side, a fixed future, and on the other, genuine personal agency. How do people even begin to reconcile that?
It's incredibly difficult. And the concept of God's omniscience, his all-knowing nature, often plays a central role in these discussions. The idea is often framed as God witnesses all of time as an eternal present.
Meaning he's outside of time.
Exactly. He exists outside of time, so past, present, and future are all now to him. If he knows everything, then, as one person put it, he is also able to see every single choice you make and every possible outcome. But this leads straight to the fundamental question. Does God know every possible ending, or does he know the one actual ending?
And if God's plan is always carried out like in every possible universe, regardless of the circumstances, as someone suggested, that certainly implies a lack of free will, almost like divine interference, doesn't it?
It does seem to point that way.
But then if God's plan could be thwarted by our choices, it seems like that would undermine his omniscience and his omnipotence. It feels like a classic catch-22.
It really does. One participant in the debate noted that those holding a Calvinist perspective, the theological tradition really emphasizing God's sovereignty and predestination, are often seen as having the fewest contradictions on this specific issue.
Okay.
But they also observe that for many, their resulting view of God isn't very nice, because it leans so heavily on this idea of a predetermined destiny, including who is saved and who isn't. Now, the common defense you hear for God's knowledge not negating free will is that God knows what you will choose, but he does not cause you to choose it.
Right. Knowledge isn't causation.
That's the argument. However, the counter-argument is pretty stark. If God creates you knowing exactly how you would turn out, especially if that includes eternal torment, then that distinction between knowing and causing feels, to some, rather hollow. It's like building a machine you know is going to crash and then blaming the machine.
That's a powerful analogy.
It is. The feeling is, for free will to be truly meaningful, the future must be, in some sense, open and not fully known or determined, at least from our perspective, within time.
Then there's the slavery argument, which is quite provocative. This viewpoint claims, pretty bluntly, that nothing in the Bible says we have free will.
Yeah, that's a strong claim.
It argues that the concept of free will, as we often think about it, was a doctrine added to church doctrine several hundred years after the life and ministry of Christ. So if not free will, then what? What's the alternative model?
The core premise here is that humanity is not truly free in the ultimate philosophical sense, but rather exists as a slave to one of two masters. Proponents of this view argue that Jesus and Paul taught that humanity are either slaves to God in righteousness or sin and Satan.
Okay, so slaves either way.
That's the idea. We have, according to this view, freedom to freely choose between whatever options our master sets in front of us, but we cannot come up with our own options. So you can choose redemption and serve God, or you can remain in sin and serve Satan, but you're always serving someone. You're never autonomously free.
And how do others react to this slavery view? I imagine that ignites some pretty strong reactions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Opponents find it deeply problematic. Some described it online as promoting a sadistic, psychopathic behavior on God's part, suggesting God is an egomaniac creating life purely for sadism, or perhaps that believers are suffering from a kind of Stockholm syndrome, developing affection for their master, God, despite this perceived lack of true freedom.
Wow, strong words.
Very strong. They argue that if free will isn't real, then sin isn't really real either, because you can't be held responsible for something you were programmed to do. And the whole idea of God sending his son to die for sins that weren't freely chosen is described as convoluted and illogical and dumb as it is immoral.
Yeah.
This view also raises that other tricky question. If God is all-knowing and sovereign, how can the Bible depict him as being surprised or disappointed?
Right. That doesn't quite fit with total foreknowledge. It's like that analogy someone used, knowing the plot of a Star Wars movie beforehand versus actually writing or editing it. If you know every single beat, every twist, every character decision, does that mean you dictated it?
That analogy perfectly captures the tension, doesn't it? The argument is that knowing what will happen doesn't equate to causing it. But the immediate counter is, well, if the decisions have been made, no choice is left to be had. Certain knowledge of what will happen equals predetermined outcome. Predetermined outcome equals no choice. It truly is a fundamental philosophical problem when you try to reconcile infinite knowledge with genuine, meaningful choice.
Okay, wow. That was a lot to chew on regarding those big theological questions. It just highlights how incredibly complex these concepts are when you really drill down. So maybe let's shift gears a bit to a more practical angle. How do we actually know God's plan for our individual lives and fulfill our God-given purpose? Many Christian perspectives definitely agree that God does have a specific, unique plan for each person, right? And that this plan fits into a larger, ordered purpose.
Yes, absolutely. The idea is that your unique gifts and abilities are designed to contribute to the whole puzzle of God's bigger plan.
Okay.
And the journey to discovering this purpose, according to our sources, is built on several foundational truths. First, some aspects of God's will are just crystal clear in His Word for everyone. He wants people to accept salvation, He wants us to avoid sin and embrace holy living, and He tells us to rejoice in every circumstance. Those are kind of the non-negotiables, the starting points for all believers.
So start with the basics, the things that apply to everyone, then build from there. And it's not just about what we do, right? It's also about what God is already doing or has done.
Exactly. You should never doubt that God is already at work on His plan for you. Jeremiah 1.5 suggests, He's been working on your plan longer than you might think, even before you were born. And even through adversity, like the people experienced in Jeremiah's time during the exile, God uses circumstances, even difficult ones, to fulfill His purposes.
That's encouraging.
It is. And perhaps the most comforting thought is that God always finishes what He starts. Philippians 1.6 and Romans 8.28 really affirm this. While we might not see the whole picture God is painting in our lives this side of heaven, He promises He will work everything together for His glory and our ultimate good.
That's a powerful idea. God actually equipping you for the plan.
Mm.
It's like you're given the exact tools you need for the job He has for you.
That's a perfect way to put it. God provides unique gifts and talents that perfectly match His plan for you. Think of Paul's analogy in Romans 12 about the body needing many different parts to function. Each part is essential and uniquely gifted. Your specific gifts are actually a significant hint to God's plan for you.
Okay.
The key is also to, walk in the light you already have. Don't let uncertainty paralyze you. Keep doing what you know is right based on His Word. Read the Bible, pray for insight, talk to trusted, wise people, and just grow where He has planted you in the moment. Don't wait for some grand, singular revelation before you start serving.
That makes a lot of sense. Act on the knowledge and gifts you already possess, right where you are. Now, our sources break down purpose into 3 different levels. Can you unpack those for us?
Yes, it seems purpose isn't just one single fixed destination, but more like a journey unfolding across 3 intertwined levels. The first is a general purpose in the world, which applies to all believers. Things like loving God and loving others, making disciples, growing in Christ-likeness, bearing spiritual fruit. That's foundational.
Okay, the universal Christian calling.
Exactly. The second level is a general purpose specific to your daily life. This is about intentionally fulfilling God's will in all the practical, everyday areas. Your spiritual life, your physical well-being, body, mind, emotions, your relationships, family, friends, peers, even strangers, your finances, your work, whether that's homemaking, a career, ministry, volunteering. It's about aligning your choices and interactions to God's glory in everything you do, day in, day out.
And the third level sounds like where the unique you part really comes in.
It is. The third level is a specific purpose to your design. This is your unique calling, maybe your life's work, and it's often revealed more gradually over time. It's profoundly shaped by your unique design, passions, and life experiences, as Psalm 139 talks about God knitting us together uniquely. An important insight here is that this specific purpose might even shift focus as you become more prepared for it over time. It's not always a static destination you arrive at once and for all.
Okay, so if we're ready to lean into this idea of purpose, how do we actually start to discover and then fulfill this personal, unique purpose? Where do we even begin? It can feel kind of big.
It can feel big, but the process starts quite personally with self-discovery. The sources suggest starting with 5 reflections. Think of them as guiding questions.
What lights a fire inside of me? What are your passions? What world issues stir you up? What messages do you feel compelled to share?
Yeah.
Second, what can I do very well without much effort? What are your natural strengths, abilities, talents? The things that feel relatively easy for you but might be hard for others.
What is unique about me? Think about your personality, your core values, any spiritual gifts you recognize in yourself.
What are my significant life experiences, both good and bad? How have they prepared or inspired you? Where have you found meaning or learned crucial lessons?
What dreams are in my heart that won't fade? What kinds of people or situations do you keep imagining yourself helping? What messages or roles keep bubbling up?
That's a really powerful framework for introspection. It really encourages you to look inward first for the clues God has already planted. Then, once you have some ideas from that reflection, how do you seek wisdom and clarity beyond just your own thoughts?
Right, it's not just navel-gazing.
Yeah.
This becomes a more collaborative process. It involves actively asking God for guidance, praying over what you're discovering, then examining those unique parts of yourself, specifically in relation to God's work in the world. Gathering input from trusted individuals, people who know you well and walk with God, is also key.
Getting outside perspective.
Exactly. Even trying to draft a simple purpose statement can help clarify things like, who do I want to help, what do I want to do, how, and what's the desired outcome. Researching how others are already addressing similar issues or needs can spark ideas. Then, prayerful reflection to really seek God's vision for it. And finally, just getting involved in opportunities flexibly. Don't be afraid to try things out.
And finally, taking action. What principles should guide that step? Because, like we said, purpose can seem like such a huge, maybe overwhelming concept. How do you actually start doing it?
The key principle here is to act from the inside out. It starts internally. This means first, trusting God and believing He has equipped you. Then, focusing on internal transformation, developing the heart of God and the mind of Christ. Keeping your focus on your unique vision, rather than getting swayed by comparison or outside pressures.
Right.
Making authentic, realistic choices. Planning simple, manageable steps, don't try to boil the ocean. Learning to anticipate and manage obstacles, because they will come. Seeking accountability and support from others is crucial. And finally, being flexible, willing to change course if you realize something truly isn't the right fit after trying it. Ultimately, as Frederick Buechner so beautifully put it, the choice is either to resist God or to join Him where He is at work in the world, finding the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. That intersection where what you love to do meets a real need, that's the sweet spot. It's a win-win where God gets the glory and you find deep, fulfilling satisfaction.
All of this sounds like a deeply personal journey, and for some, maybe listening right now, it might feel a bit overwhelming to navigate alone, especially when you're wrestling with such profound questions about God's will and your place in it.
That's very true. And that's where something called spiritual direction can be incredibly helpful. It's often defined as a sacred opportunity to draw into a deeper relationship with God. Thomas Merton, the well-known spiritual writer, described this purpose beautifully. He said the whole point is to penetrate beneath the surface of our lives and draw out our inner spiritual freedom. It involves reflecting deeply on God, on yourself, on your daily experiences, learning to notice God's presence and grace more readily, listening to your deeper longings, and really opening yourself up to God's love and healing.
So what are some of the practical benefits of engaging in spiritual direction? What does it actually do for someone on this journey?
Well, the benefits are quite tangible. It can help you consciously incorporate more spirituality into your daily routine. It provides a safe, confidential space to discuss your spiritual experiences, your doubts, your questions. It can really assist in discerning God's will, especially during difficult decisions. It helps you see God's presence more clearly in the everyday fabric of your life. It can enable you to face challenges more grounded in God's love and grace. And it just gives you that dedicated space to voice your deepest hopes, struggles, and questions of faith without judgment.
So it's kind of like having a dedicated spiritual companion, someone to help you see things maybe from a different angle or notice things you might miss on your own.
That's a really good way to describe it. A spiritual director acts as a spiritual companion who walks alongside you on your journey. Typically, you might meet monthly for about an hour. And it's important to know these directors usually undergo quite rigorous training and are committed to their own ongoing spiritual growth through prayer, continuing education, and often supervision themselves.
And it's important to clarify this isn't the same as therapy or counseling, is it? That's a different thing.
That's a crucial distinction, yes.
Yeah.
Spiritual direction is not the same as clinical or pastoral counseling. It has a very different focus and methodology. It's centered specifically on your relationship with God and how you experience and respond to Him in your life. There's even a visual reminder sometimes used. Imagine 3 chairs in the room, symbolizing the presence of the Holy Spirit, along with the directee and the director.
That's a powerful image. It really frames the interaction as a shared spiritual exploration, not just two people talking.
It really does. And maybe a good thought to reflect on from John Wesley is that God's grace creates within us the desire for God. If we respond to God, our desire increases more and more. This grace teaches us to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with our God. Spiritual direction is one way to nurture that response, that deepening relationship, which ultimately transforms how we live and understand our place in God's world.
We've really taken quite a journey today, haven't we? From peeling back the layers of familiar, maybe misunderstood biblical passages to wrestling with that intricate, sometimes mind-bending philosophical debate on free will and divine planning.
Definitely a workout for the brain.
And then moving into those practical frameworks for discerning personal purpose, and finally understanding the potential role of spiritual direction in that whole process.
It's been a comprehensive exploration, looking at how deep these seemingly simple concepts can actually go, and how understanding their nuances can truly enrich our perspective, offering both real challenge and hopefully profound comfort too.
Absolutely. We've explored some truly profound and sometimes contradictory ideas about God's plans, our choices, and our ultimate purpose. So, as you, our listener, consider how these different viewpoints coexist or even clash out there in the world, what new questions arise for you personally about the nature of destiny and your own agency in your life? How might understanding these varied perspectives shape your own ongoing search for meaning and direction? Something to chew on.